So that's why I wouldn't and besides that, you have really 2 days, if you're, according to this schedule, because you have the Alhambra and then Whittier the next day, which is next door.
Right.
So you really have 2 opportunities for people to come and be heard, and nothing precludes them from offering us information later on that particular area.
Right. So if you recognize that as an issue, we would ask so if Whittier and those 2 areas are that close together, is there some other perception that you have where we would exchange for one of those areas?
I'm curious why Whittier was put into its own, as a venue. We got an offer from somebody to?
No. Whittier was it was a central location in a different part of Region 4 as we were looking at it.
I guess I need to look at my region a little bit, my map.
It'd be great to have a map, and it'd be great for us, to be honest, but to have a map, just to physically pinpoint these. And for some of us who know LA but don't know the nuances of LA.
Maybe at the full commission, can we have a map there?
Except I don't think we want to get into this big debate. I think we need to make recommendations.
Right.
Otherwise, we'll never get through it in the full commission.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Well, really, I'm looking at my region map. That's not very helpful.
Mr. Wilcox has a comment.
Yes,
Thank you.
Can I also say that when you see Whittier, we're not married to Whittier. I mean, there are many cities there, and as the California League of Cities is working their membership, there'll be a city next door to Whittier. So.
I would go farther east, and then that addresses some of Commissioner Yao's concern.
Maybe when we ask for approve the region, and these are recommended city, that we'll make a decision on 14 days in advance when we have to post the agenda and the location. So that'll give you some flexibility because it doesn't impact the travel. It doesn't really impact anything else other than having to notice it accordingly.
No, the venue. The venue is the big deal. We need a lot of time. If we're handling this as staff, we need a pretty solid schedule now so that we can go out and start this schedule. If we're waiting until 14 days ahead and then trying to get a videographer there, a stenographer, it'll be an impossible task for staff. It's got to be much longer than 14 days lead time for us.
Commissioner Parvenu.
I'm very I'll just say personally, I'm very comfortable with this schedule, and I see staff has put a lot of time, attention into making this as logical as possible in terms of travel, and I think the radius of our advertising or marketing, rather, and outreach is going to include and encompass all these areas surrounding, let's just say Whittier, to include the San Gabriel. I think we have to be very rigorous and very deliberate in getting the word out to the surrounding communities so they can get on MetroLink, for example, or plan their schedule to get off work early and arrive at these various locations that are pinpointed. I like the idea of having a stationary target, something to work with that we can go and run with and not nitpick over some of the more intricate, problematic aspects of it, because this entire state has issues, maybe not so far in the north, but we're going to run into controversial or areas where we're going to have to look at areas like compactness and contiguous nesting. We're going to have to look at this throughout the entire state. So the Bay Area, for example, we can spend the entire time here talking about potential areas that we need to give special concern to. But I know that's my bias, but I'd like to take something to run with it and set some hard schedules so we can plan and logistically make it happen.
And I agree also on the other side, when you're going to pick a site to have a public hearing, the other side needs a lot of time to plan for that, not just the staff. Commissioner DeGiulio?
I was just going back to the staff's question about looking at individual things. If you look at it, there's advantages and disadvantages to being early, middle, late in the process. If you're early, you get your input in, so to speak, before the maps. Later, you get to see what's been drawn, but it's after the fact. But I did notice that the northern part of California is the first one that's hit. early, it's the very first meetings, Region 9. And I know to some degree there may not be a lot of change, just because of population base, there may not be a lot that will be changing in those areas. But that's the only time those regions are hit. The next furthest north, you have some San Francisco in June 14th, and then you have in July 11th is Stockton. But other than that, there's nothing that goes north again after that. I don't know if that's something that the advisory committee would like to go back at some point to at least present the maps. I'll channel Commissioner Forbes a little bit here and others, but there's no other touch in the northern part of the state other than the beginning of April. Other than that, it's really a blank. Anything north?
It is unfortunate, but the reality is we're just so stretched with time, resources, and energy. And the census data release now shows that area has actually lost some population, not gained. So we would love to do that. If we can figure out a way to get up there again the second time, third time, whatever, we could, but I just don't see how we can do that.
Yeah. I would agree. I think just looking at this doesn't it just sort of take your breath away?
Sure. Oh, yes. Oh, of course. I just didn't. I just was going to throw that out as a consideration.
Yeah.
I didn't know if the advisory committee had.
I guess we have to just keep trying to let people know, we're doing this for everyone, but, it's like the noisier kids are going to get the attention.
Yeah. Well, it might be worthwhile for staff at those, the northernmost meetings that we have is to do some type of outreach to the further north and say this will be your opportunity. I know it'll be some travel time to come a couple hours south, but your touch will be San Francisco, Oakland, Stockton in terms of the second phase.
And I think we should give consideration, the full commission, to making a great presence in those areas where we are only going to stop in once.
Good point.
Commissioner Baraba, then Commissioner Yao.
It's not so much that, but that area, I mean, it's so sparsely populated. You're going to be moving counties around, not census tracts, and so the complexity is not as difficult up there. So it's not that we're not interested. It's not a simple job, but it's less complex than other places.
Commissioner Yao.
Obviously, the map is the key thing. As far as the report is concerned, do we need to do any kind of outreach in terms of showing a draft report and then the final report? Do we think that's an issue? There's a report that goes along with the map.
Right.
Does that need our attention? Obviously, not to the same extent as the map, but do we need to have any kind of input prior, any kind of review with the public face-to-face prior to us releasing the report?
Yeah.
My understanding is that the report is simply the terms and terminologies and rationale you use for coming to those maps. So if that's the case, and we've charged our line drawer with having that be part of their responsibility to produce the report, I never thought in terms of publishing the reports themselves. I always thought that they would be, once you had your final maps, they would be produced with them.
I think the final report basically is us explaining why the map is good. So that will be the first time if we don't allow public review. That's the first time a lot of public would read that on paper.
The issue becomes this, that if, for instance, if you publish those reports on the second draft with the maps and on June 1st or July 1st and gave them 14 days while you took testimony, if they want to, if there are changes, then you've got one 14-day period left. I would have to ask whomever our consultant is it typical to publish the report with the map. I've always only thought in terms of you published the map, and then when you're finished with your final map, you produced a report that gave the terms and conditions of the map. So I don't know technically enough to tell you.
Again, I'm simply asking the question as to whether we need to
Yeah.
think about it or not. If we already reach a conclusion that we don't, then so be it. I'm not
That our-
pushing for it.
Well,
Is-
go ahead.
No, I just say, if that's our conclusion, I won't make or ask my question, but is that a firm conclusion?
Yeah, if you can give me about 10 minutes, I'll go get an answer and come back.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold on.
Well, that is being
Before he
done.
goes,
Commissioner Baraba.
Dan, it would seem to me that if I was a citizen out there and I saw the map, I'd say, that's really nice. Now, what does it mean? I mean, I would want something that describes the map and why we did what we did. Now, if that's not a report, whatever you call it, I think that's got to be with the map. Because there'll be some people who are looking at maps for the first time, and they're going to wonder, what is the consequence of what you did?
Okay.
Commissioner Raya?
Then I will ask my question, which is, if we do a draft report with certain rationale in that report, and then we get stuff back, and then we say, oh, no, we changed our minds, not just moving the line, but the rationale for doing so, whether that just gets more, there's too much inconsistency or confusion. That was my only thought.
I think if we want to take just a short break, or if you want to continue, let me just go ask someone who's done this what they typically produce with that map. What's the typical production, and then we'll be dealing with facts rather than worrying about it void.
In your absence, would you want us to take a break, or I don't want to take a break and
It's being requested.
it's,
Actually, if I could take a break, if we could all take a break, I'd appreciate
let's
it.
take a break.
Thank
Let's
you.
take a 10-minute break. There, I got it. Now I'm totally confused on that yellow button.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm reconvening our subcommittee meeting. Dan, I think you took a 10-minute break, and in the hopes to come back and give us a very, very significant.
I went
bit of
out and got
information.
smarter. So I spoke with Doug Johnson downstairs about what had happened in Arizona and what line drawers when you do lines, what occurs with the report. He said typically the report on the interim would be back to you with a PowerPoint or something saying, this is what you asked me to do, these were the ripple effects that occurred, and then these are the things that you could do to alleviate some new problem that might have occurred. He said, and then you would give them more instructions, and then he would go back and they would work with it, and they would come back and say, okay, this is what happened. So that process occurs. I said, what about the report at the end? Is that publicly vetted? And he said that in Arizona it wasn't, because it tied up into litigation, and so they held the reports. But that there wasn't an intention to actually have the time to vet the final report, that the final report is just a summary of your instructions to him and then the iterations that got you to where that final map is. So again, as it was termed in the initiative, where it says it would be an explanation of the terms and the thoughts of the commission and so forth, he saw it as simply that, something that accompanied and explained. But then he leaned over and he goes, well, I guess people could have thoughts on that if you wanted to vet it. And I looked at him, he goes, but then you get 1,000 thoughts. So I got an answer. I don't know if it's the answer, but I believe that in the end you're simply going to put the report with the map, and the map's going to, and it's just going to stand in support.
Commissioner Baraba.
My concern is that we submit the maps, and our communications director gets a phone call from somebody from the press. And he says, so what did you do? And he said, look at the map. Well, the map's not going to say what we did. And it seems to me that we need, the map is the what we did. We need a document that says why we did it. and what was the outcome of what we did. Because otherwise, we're going to have a lot of questions that are not going to be answered.
So Commissioner Barber is suggesting, unlike the Arizona model, that we have some type of template that says, at this point, this is the reasoning behind our map of some sort.
Well, you're going to have the best. You're going to have the best template there is. Now that I think about it, I mean, what Mr. Johnson said is your line drawers are going to meet with you on a live video stream and present a PowerPoint that will be on that live video stream and discuss your thoughts. And you're going to give them that instruction live, and that thing's going to post with it. Now, I think it would certainly be reasonable to require your line drawer to give a short narrative per map, or some narrative, probably won't be short. But when it comes down to what you were thinking, the whole world's going to be able to see that forever.
Commissioner Yao?
Maybe the approach is to define precisely what that report will be and get input on it as to whether that's what the expectation is, and then cap that decision off and run with it, as compared to leaving it open until the very end and allow it to flex in whichever direction. If we decide that all we want to do is capturing all the directions and all the changes that happens to the map from the beginning to the end, and that is the report, and that contains all our rationale and all our direction in creating that map. If we say that's the final report, then maybe that's all we should do. But let's define it early so that we don't end up arguing as to which is good and which is better.
Commissioner Baraba?
One of the things we've listed is we're going to spend a lot of time identifying communities of interest. Okay, and if we do our job right, these communities of interest are going to be represented by districts. Shouldn't we talk about the extent to which we were able to accomplish that? Because that was one of our missions. So can we, in our report, identify the extent to which we were able to contain communities of interest within legislative districts? Because somebody's going to do that study for you. And it would seem to me it's incumbent upon us to say, here's what we did. We went out there, we listened, everybody said these were communities of interest, and to the extent to which we could, we kept them within district. We didn't split them up. Or in some cases we had to, but we had a good reason for doing it.
Commissioner Roya?
I'm not sure whether you're talking now about doing this as we go along still. That's still your recommendation to do? Okay. Which, of course, does require creating some kind of a template for how it's going to be presented, and deciding who is responsible for producing it. Is it the line drawers that are also going to produce a report as we go along? You know, some kind of summary in the way that maybe Rob summarizes our meetings, you know. So who's going to come up with that document?
Yeah. My feeling it should be the commission, and because we're the ones that were selected to draw the maps, and we should describe what we accomplished. I don't think that's a line drawer's job.
No, we defined that in the line drawer's contract, that it was a line drawer's job to produce the reports that went with the map, and we did that because that person's the one taking your instructions and doing it. Now, do I believe that they should simply give you a report? No, I think you'll have a great deal of input into it, but I think that conceptually, in my mind, it makes more sense that the line drawer would keep track of those types of instructions so that you could edit more than produce.
That's fine, and that would be an appendix to the report. But the report should come from the commission. We were given a job to do, and we ought to describe how the hell we did it.
I have a question on that thought, but let me get Commissioner Parvenu first.
I'll be brief. I agree, Mr. Claypool, that I view this as a two-step process, that the line drawer is taking careful documentation, the chronology of what's going on each and every step of the way, and that we concurrently, as we review or respond to their decision-making process are keeping our own response in terms of editing what they're doing. So I do see it as an approach from both the line drawer and ourselves, providing input so that we can document it in a simplistic, reader or viewer-friendly way, so it's not overcomplicated, so that, as Commissioner Barabbas says, so that the public gets a general idea that there was some logic or some method to the madness, some method, a methodology that we follow that's very clear and succinct and not overly complicated.
I want to try to link this up with the actual format in a public input meeting. I read the scope of work that was sent out to the IFP process, and the responses pretty much say they're going to do a report, and they're going to follow issues of contiguity of cities and counties, communities of interest. It's all outlined there. So when we actually hire the consultant and is on board, he or she is on board, we're going to fit that into the input meetings format. But we haven't detailed exactly what that format will look like yet, correct? So we're going to have to wait till that consultant is on board and then actually map out what a 5-6 hour format looks like. At that point, it should tie in to Commissioner Barabbas' concern that on the commission side, on our side, on the dais, what are we looking for in terms of measuring our sense of progress and why we arrived at that moment, at that map? And I think what you're asking. I don't know the answer to that.
All this concern that's been raised about, the impartiality of the line drawer. They're somebody we hired to do a job that we're going to direct them to do. And the impartiality is embedded in this commission. And then we are, it seemed to me, obligated to document and write down what we directed them to do and what came out. And because that's our job. And so I want to be left with a map and somebody saying, and this is what I did. That's not sufficient in my mind to garner the respect and trust of the citizens of the state.
Can you suggest what we could do?
Well, we could either assign one of our advisory committees to be figuring out how to work that out. And a technical advisory committee probably wouldn't be mind getting involved in that.
All right, so noted. Okay.
Right, Commissioner DeGiulio?
I think that would be a great opportunity for the Technical Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I agree with a statement that we will have a PowerPoint and information live streaming that process, and that's going to be part of the document, and that perhaps a short summary on what happened during that time, whatever. But the other angle on the report is that it has to pass legal muster. So the VRA attorney and Mr. Miller and others are going to have to weigh in on the development of this report, because not only are our maps going to be challenged, but also we have to provide the documentation, legal included, that shows compliance with all of these regulations and issues that we need to fulfill. So I think that ultimately, as Mr. Barabbas is saying, the Commission is responsible for that report, but it's going to be coming from various parties. And I agree with Mr. Yao that that's still kind of in the abstract. That's too abstract right now. We really need to define, what that might look like, and what the is it something that only a line drawer does? Well, not necessarily, because the legal has to jump into it. There's probably some issues related to the use of money, the budget. We need to include that. So. I think it's going to ultimately come down to a report that's a compilation of various parties that have worked on the process, reviewed by the commission, and ultimately approved by the commission as our document.
Commissioner DiGiulio.
In that sense, I think if the technical committee, advisory committee brought that on, we would see ourselves as a drafter of a report that would eventually be adopted and approved by the commission.
Oh, now we're getting somewhere. Commissioner DiGiulio.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, I see there's two things going on. Excuse me. One is the report, as I see as the final, or at least the justification for the final maps that we submit, which is one issue, which will incorporate a lot of the different factors. But it's my understanding what you're asking, that you're tasking them, technical advisory committee, is to also, once we do these initial map releases, that we have something that's a, for lack of a better word, a press release. We were, if you conceptualize this, if you release a map in a press, someone picks this up and they just look at a map, they'll have no context for what's going on. I think it would be beneficial to have a very brief summary or some type of highlights as to how some of the considerations that went into this, and that might be something that would come from the technical side, the line drawer. So to just release a map in the absence of some type of documentation.
Yeah.
That's what if I'm correct, that's what you're asking the technical
I think
committee
so,
to do. Okay.
because I can see a case where one decision is very controversial, and the commission will have to speak up on how we arrived at that.
That's true.
And there may be other times when nobody cares, but there are going to be a couple of times when it's going to be very, very controversial. Commissioner Raya.
I was just thinking that we also have the option to set up another committee, and then that way particular commissioners who are interested in doing that particular, so it isn't just thrust on the technical advisory committee. I mean, maybe you agree to do it, but there may be other people who could have valuable input, so we could consider creating a, whatever the committee would be called.
As we found in our meeting today, the technical advisory committee gave a few things to outreach, and we'd be happy to take one or two things back. So share and share alike.
If you're noticing, I'm really combining the two committee minutes. Yes, Commissioner Young.
Just one comment. I think the reason this topic is being discussed right now is perhaps we should set a milestone of a draft release of the report and then the final release of the report. I don't think it necessarily have to go through 3 releases, but maybe on the second release of the map, we would have the first release of the report in whatever format it is, so that we can get the input, and then it'll get released at about the same time that the final map is released. So if we acknowledge that to be the work scope, then we probably should include that as part of the recommendation.
I like that. Kind of a progress report.
Let me just mention that the question, this discussion about the final report, so-called final report, is something that we'll report out tomorrow with the full commission, and then we'll engage the commission and seeing what their thoughts might be.
All right. Any other questions? Very good. Let me go to our toolkit. At these input meetings, we're going to have a toolkit, which is one of the instruments that will guide these actual meetings. So we're going to review that for the first time, what that looks like.
Thank you.
Oh, I guess it's the same one, right?
So, Rob, could you take us through this?
Certainly, and we also shared this with the Public Information Advisory Committee this morning, because we're going to be using a lot of this in our press materials. So this is first. I would like to, and to those that are watching and listening online, to publicly thank our partners, Redistricting California, and specifically Kathy Fung for her immediate help when we turned to her and asked, saying, you know, you've done a lot of this work already, a lot of good work, and many of the people that have been involved and are with the partners started working on conceptualizing Proposition 11 years before it was put on the ballot. So they've worked toiled in the fields on this, and they really know the fundamentals here. So we turned to them, and together we put together this product, which the goal of this toolkit is, and I think at points when we were talking about a toolkit and all of the bells and whistles, and it almost at times seemed daunting. What was this huge product that we're going to put together? And as we see what this product is it's to make it less scary for someone to be involved in the process, to ease them into this, to give them the tools to be able to have a conversation, to be able to give the information to the commission at the hearings. This is all about for the public input hearings. And so we wanted to make it easy to read, easy to use, very focused, factual, and very useful. And so we could work, if you wanted to look through this now, take a few moments, but basically it covers some very basic topics. What is redistricting? And probably the most important question that can be posed to the public is, why is this important to me? And why should I care? And then it describes about the commission and the mandate of the commission and how the commission came to be and what it's about. And then how can someone participate? And then the criteria that the commissioners are going to be using and considering. And then what is the Voting Rights Act and why is it important? And what is a community of interest? And I think this is important, and the partners were key in putting this together, in that we can give the definition that's in the state constitution on a community of interest. But then, as you see, there's a subset here, and it's basically, because when you have the buzzword of community of interest, it's basically, how do I talk about my community? Because that's what we want to hear. That's what you want to hear to be able to draw the district boundaries, is you want to hear those stories about individual communities, and you want to be able to give them the tools to be able to do that. Then we have a portion in here is, where can I get outside help? What are those other, the redistricting centers and the other websites and the map drawing sites, and all, to avail themselves of all of those tools? We have just some frequently asked questions that go all over the map of things that people want to know about the commission and the commissioners and the process. Then who are the commissioners with the commission bios? And then we are thanking the many partners and people that have helped us. And that's sort of an overview.
Great. And how are we going to disseminate this? How do we get this out?
Well, first of all, it goes on our website. So it'll be, there is an online tool, and then can be emailed, disseminated. All of our partners are ready and able to disseminate it, and whether that's in a hard copy form or basically, and of course we are looking to do this online as much as we possibly can. First of all, for cost reasons, but also to giving it to the redistricting centers and the media, and so widely disseminated.
Questions? No? Commissioner DiGiulio?
I did not mean to sit right behind you either, Mr. Wilcox. Right?
No, good, I can scratch.
Yeah. Okay. Just out of curiosity, I understand if it was posted online, kind of the format that would be, but is this something that you also see as a little booklet? I mean, it wouldn't be little. Is it, if it's in a hard copy, what would be the format? I'm assuming it wouldn't just be paper like this, or?
You know, I think that we were concentrating on the content, and I think there are a couple of options and I think basically we will look at at the most cost-effective of how, I mean, I would love to have a booklet like Redistricting California has, that very glossy booklet, but yeah, we're not going to be able to do that, so.
So you see this more as a document that can be downloaded by organizations, and then they can distribute it whatever they want, way they want. Okay, so that's
Yeah, but I'm also having ongoing conversations with those organizations to see, you know, and I learned very early on to ask, what is the best way to work with you? How do you want this information? So we'll be asking that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Parvenu, did you have? Nope. Is this going to be in various languages?
Thank you. Yes, this will be translated into, and I don't think we have the full list yet of what the languages are, but in the beginning, of course, with Spanish, and then probably picking up on the 6 languages in total of the Secretary of State.
Commissioner Parvenu, and then Commissioner Yao.
Okay, as this is converted to a more user-friendly print medium, will there be illustrations or graphs or charts or photos or any other visually interesting additions?
There may be. We will definitely consider that, and I know that with our partners are excellent at the kinds of graphics and things they've been able to do, and so I know that they're sharing artwork with us, and we're even looking at getting artwork from them for our website, so in photos and things. So that is a good point.
Commissioner Baraba.
Yes, we had talked earlier about at some of these first meetings before we had the maps of having something to show at the meeting, and one of the things that I've been talking with Mr. Claypool is that there was always this question. Remember that we got advised, don't show a preliminary map because everybody thinks that's what the one's going to be. But what we could show is a map of the counties and which ones have grown and which ones have not grown as fast, so they get an idea where the growth is. And these are maps that have shown up already. And then we could show a map of the existing districts with the proviso that this is not where we're starting. We just want you to see how things are going to change given the over and under, so that you would get a little flavor of why this, what caught my attention is this, why is it important? Well, it's going to be really important because a lot has happened in 10 years in this state. And that might be one way of, in these meetings, of getting people interested in doing it. And I think Dan had talked to some of the other outreach groups, and some thought it was a good idea. Others were a little concerned because of the issue, or does it look like we're going to be, starting from the old maps? And I think if we could position it first with the county maps to show that the difference, and then say, now what does this mean from a redistricting point of view? It means the old map's got to go because it's way out of line. And then you can get into that discussion. And that really points out the importance of why we're redistricting.
Commissioner Raya?
Okay. Are you suggesting these graphs and such for this document?
No, not necessarily. This document
okay.
kind of remind me now, but it might be worth having something in it that shows the change that's taken place in 10 years.
Well, this is why we should all be talking to each other at the same time, because we discussed this at length this morning in the public whatever the other committee is, public information. Yeah. Thank you. And I think we saw this particular document as just an engagement kind of thing, just to give people the basics to get them interested and just kind of in touch with the process. And Cynthia had a very good, I thought, viewpoint of how to make, why is it important to me? Why is redistricting important to me? And she talked about it in very concrete terms, just that, there's a lot of money that's allocated all over, and if you want to have a voice in where it goes, that's why it's important to you. A very, some very concrete sense to give people about an otherwise, very kind of out there subject that, it's hard to really pin yourself down to why, even what the process is and why it's important. But I still think that this document itself needs to stay it's simple. I don't know. Not go into too many things. It's really not. It's not.
Yeah, but my thought is that not to have it in here, but if you go to a meeting and this toolkit is there, and we could start the meeting off by saying, show them something that's visual, that points out the importance of what is redistricting and why is it necessary.
It doesn't have to be attached to the...
Oh, no, it doesn't have to
Right.
be attached to it. No.
Well, and that's where our video too could play a part
Yeah.
in an
Absolutely.
intro to a meeting, to every meeting or whatever. But just that would be the sort of, here we are. Here's why we're here. Let's.
Because most people are coming to a meeting and they're going to want to see something, I would think, and yet we don't want to show them something that looks like we've made a decision. But on the other hand, we want to show them something, and we give them and I think the shift in population is something that can be dramatized and demonstrate why it's important to get involved.
Yeah, now Commissioner Bromley, hasn't that been published already by the Census Bureau? I mean, I've been looking at those maps.
Yeah, they're out there. My question is when you start the meeting off, it would be good if we made sure everybody had seen it.
Oh, so if we make copies of that and we present it in a meeting, because it's already published data.
Yeah, and we might want to then just, tie it to the commission's
Yeah.
work.
Oh, that's
about what we're going to do.
Commissioner,
Yeah.
Excellent. Commissioner Dees.
could I make a suggestion? I think this is a great, as Commissioner Raya said, an important aspect of the outreach in terms of information and providing the basics, something that's not necessarily simple, but it's made the complex issue easy to understand. I think maybe what Commissioner Brava is thinking, and is that the other discussion has gone on, is there may be a separate toolkit for the technical side that could be used. I can see that we need to have whoever the technical consultants when they're on board. That was part of the issue with trying to develop a toolkit with CCP, was that they needed the technical input. Though I don't think it's necessary. The way it's been done here is this is the informational aspect of the outreach that won't change. But I think there may be a need for a separate technical toolkit so that when we go into these meetings, we will give the public an idea of, again, not that we've drawn maps, but that there's some aspects that will be considered in the discussion, as well as just, again, the framework for how we expect the public to give us input, whether it be actual forms that the public can fill out when they're addressing the commission, or I have no idea. I don't want to say that this is what's going to happen, but I'm just thinking out loud here that there's probably a technical format that could be a toolkit that could be developed at a later date.
So let me ask Rob, can we do that?
Well, maybe not something separate, but now once we get the technical expert on board, maybe giving a chapter
Okay.
to the technical expert, saying this is what we want or need to hear, and here's how you can present it through the technical acts. So we kind of hang on to all of this and then beef it up by putting the technical aspect.
Commissioner Baraba? Commissioner
On
Young,
page,
Commissioner
item
Ryan.
8, where you give them direction to the assistance sites, maybe what we should find out is what they've prepared in the way of technical direction, and what you could expect if you go to the assistance site. That might be a way of having them be consistent across the...
That's a great idea. I'm going to go and visit the one here in Sacramento, and so that's an excellent suggestion.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. Commissioner Young?
The key differences between this document and the one that we have seen previously from Redistricting CA really is in the section titled, How Do I Talk About My Community? I think the other one basically talk about all the other things as to why it's important and why you should get involved and so on and so forth. What my thought is, since the other booklet is readily available, and all we have to do, perhaps, is pay for the printing costs and get additional copies of it, whether we should try to make this into an addendum to that existing document as compared to repeating so much of it that they have already done. I'm talking about that little small booklet. I suspect that Irvine Foundation and California Forward and all the organizations will be happy to give us permission to print more of it at this point in time.
Which one are you referring to? The little one that was done by funded by the Irvine Foundation?
Right.
Way early when we first met.
Right. And that's all. That's the best information at that point, and I think that is a very well done booklet.
Yes.
And try not to repeat what they have done or.
Well, my point is a lot of the information that's in their booklet is in here because I work with those partners, and because we do want. There is going to be repeat information, but we will want to finally have a standalone document of our own that we can say this, that we can put our seal of approval on, that it does take from other sources, so there will be some repeating, but what we also tried to do is make it a global document and taking all the information in and finally being able to say, this is an official CRC document.
I acknowledge that perhaps is a good goal, but I find their document to be a very concise, simple booklet that catches your attention for somebody that's not at all familiar with redistricting. Mm-hmm. So if we can find a way to embrace that document and come up with something that enhances it, for example, how to talk about my community, for example, how to get to the software sites and so on and so forth, and as compared to make their documents sort of obsolete after this one comes out.
Right.
Whether that wouldn't be a just as good an approach as. I think they have done a good job, and I think their message is so simple that they can reach a lot of people.
Yes.
And when we try to include everything that they have and then go into it in great depth, it may not be effective as keeping it separate and having two documents doing the same thing as compared to having a single document. That's just my thought at this point in time. Oh. And they can continue to distribute their document, and we're going to give them perhaps the addendum to go along with it, and we'll likewise get maybe more copies of their document available and distribute it at our outreach meeting, plus the...
But did the Irvine piece come out in different languages as well?
You know, that's a really good question. I'm not sure if it did.
Okay, so...
I don't think so. I haven't seen.
I'm trying to go online and look at the, but for some reason it won't. It's telling me I can't get the document.
Huh. I think redistrictingca.org has it readily available on that site. Is that what you're on?
That's where I am, but it's maybe my.
But anyway, that's my thought on it as compared to.
But I do think Rob has a point, though. We do need to put out a document under our stamp, saying this came out of the commission. And if it's the only document that has it in Latino or Tagalog or those languages, then that really is part of our mission. Commissioner Ryan?
Oh, no, everything's been said that I thought. Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Oh, Commissioner Aguirre.
Yeah, it's... I agree with Commissioner Yao that the other it's a pamphlet is small, easy to handle. It's simple, it's concise, attractive, and so getting back to Commissioner Julio's question about format, I'm not sure whether. What format this is going to be, whether this is just going to be 8.5 by 11 packet like this. Mm-hmm. And so I think that if I'm really interested in the information as an organizer, I'll probably look through this and utilize the information. But then as an organizer, when I go out into the community, I need something that's much more condensed, that I can just go to individual community members and say, this is why you need to get involved. And so if whatever format this takes, I think that we probably need like a one-pager, one side or both sides, that has the essential information, that hook that will bring people, interest people in the process itself, so that if I want to organize a group, I have the information to organize a group. But in order to get those individuals to come to my meeting, then I have to give them kind of like a flyer, an informational flyer that's slick, that's attractive, that catches their information, that shows visually their community that they can relate to, multi-ethnically perhaps, and perhaps in their own language, so that we not only use this information, which I think is very good information, but we also need something that's a little bit more brief. So.
Commissioner Arroyo.
Yeah, I did pull it up. Okay. So looking at it now, I'm reminded of, what it was like. And I remember, I think it may have been Kathy who commented that it was written to a 6th or 7th grade reading level. Mm-hmm. And clearly that's, our document is more involved in that. So I'm not sure if maybe it's something completely different that what this very simple one does and what.
Right. I think they complement one another, and they serve different purposes. The toolkit is more technical, and it's more really to educate and get someone ready to be a witness to testify at a hearing. And then there's other documents, as the Commissioner was saying, that we need as community organizers are out there to just really simply tell the story, as the video will do. The video is to be, short in length and to really grab people's attention so that they say, I want to learn more, I'm going to go to the website, or I'm going to go look at inside attend a meeting and do more. But I think it's been mentioned several times, it's that hook. So I think there will be a complement of materials.
Okay. So we need them both. It's a different target.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me go on to my next topic, and that is when we have these venues, and this was brought up at the technical committee as well, our partners who have showed up at our meetings are generally large statewide organizations like Maldiv and Naleo. And they really don't have the capability of reaching down into the grassroots communities in different parts of the state. And a couple of Saturdays back when they made testimony, I was astounded that several of them had no contact in San Diego County, second largest county in the state. And so I followed up and made local calls in San Diego, and they said they have not contacted us. So I immediately contacted them and hooked them up with local organizations, and they were very happy to do that. Partly because they don't have the resources themselves to do that, the national groups. So they were very happy to link up with the community groups. So when we have these input meetings, I think we need to look seriously at expanding that grassroots contacts. And maybe some of us here are actively involved in our communities and can make that contact. But that's probably something we're going to have to sort out to make that connection.
That's so true. And I met with the executive director of New America Media, which is really the prestigious hub of all ethnic media, and they've done an excellent job. They work with the U.S. Census, so they really know how to get to the communities and get grassroots and into through the ethnic media in those areas. And they are partnering now partnering with us. And it's just such an extensive network that also one of the things that the executive director brought up to me is that not only would the ethnic media want to help you publicize and get the word out, they're also going to want to be heard. That the ethnic media wants to, in many cases, testify because they believe, and it is true, that they probably know those communities better than anybody. So there's a real partnership and synergy. And to talking about what you're discussing, Commissioner, this is the way that we're going to be able to get into the grassroots. It's that real local, the ethnic media, but also when we're talking about the neighborhood newspapers, the weeklies and those types of things that get a whole different kind of readership that are maybe more of a community newspapers, very helpful in defining communities of interest. And so those will also be, so when you're talking about grassroots, that's really the way that we can connect with them.
Yeah. And that's why I sent up Neighborhood House Association to you guys.
And we had a very good meeting with them, yes.
They have extensive grassroots connections. Well, they can't actively get involved, but they can make all of those connections.
That's right.
They're what I would call cultural validators. When they say, you need to get involved, then ears turn around. And that's just the way people network at that grassroots level.
Right.
Commissioner Young.
One area that unfortunately we kind of isolate from them, and part of it is our mission, but the other part of it is perhaps a little bit of understanding is we fail to connect with the elected officials in each of the region, okay? Because the elected officials, whether it's a assembly person or whether it's a senator, they are the one that have the top-down view as to what that community is like, okay? Because over many, many years, when these communities are unhappy with certain things that go on, they complain to them, okay? But in our process, the way Prop 11 and so on is put together, we feel that we have to keep arm's length from them, and absolutely enjoying the map, we should keep arm's length from them. But when it comes to communication, I don't think we have that same issue, okay? But so far, in all the public meetings, you have not heard a beep from a single staffer to these officers, okay? And I don't know whether we want to try something in terms of saying that we can work together and make this redistricting beneficial across the board, okay? We understand what our criteria are, and it doesn't mean that we're against you. We're all working for the public. We're all trying to make democracy better and try to rope them in because, yes, absolutely, the local groups would understand their neighborhood or their ethnic group and on and on. But the people that truly understand the community, what the neighborhoods are, why is this neighborhood disagreeing with this neighborhood, they have more information than you can possibly imagine. And if we can get to that group and construct a method that we can work together, they are the one that can really propagate this message for us very, very effectively. They have the database. They know who runs what community in an informal way. And so as I said, I'm just talking right now. I don't know what's legal, what's not legal, what can be done and what cannot be done, and what impression are we creating by taking these type of actions. But that really is a true source of asset, or true source of opportunity. We have ignored, maybe on purpose, maybe not. Okay.
Rob?
Yes, and I think you make a very good point. And if we separate out for a moment the legislators, the Assembly and the Senate, let's look at the audience of the local elected officials, of the council members and county supervisors and school board members. We are actively reaching out to all of them in partnership with the California League of Cities and the Association of Counties and School Boards. So we will have them communicating to their membership and motivating them and getting information to them so they can get it out to their constituents. And I totally agree. I mean, that's a huge network. We're talking about, hundreds and hundreds of locally elected officials with the toolkit. When we're coming to your area, they're active in helping us book venues, hosting us. They're all, I think they all want to play a major part and can in these elected officials. So I totally agree, and they are part of our outreach.
That's good, because I think in the technical committee earlier you had mentioned, Commissioner Yao, that we should outreach to cities and counties and here school districts as well, and other maybe special interest jurisdictions.
And there's a whole special districts that are out there that have their own organization.
You're doing a great job. I didn't know that, so now we know. Commissioner DiGilio.
I don't mean to jump around. I just was kind of looking at the agenda, and I was wondering if maybe I had missed it a little bit, but I was curious, just going back to the first agenda item about the meeting frameworks. Had there really been a discussion about how, I see this as a schedule, but had there been any decision from the advisory committee about the structure of, is that what is meant by the meeting framework?
We have not, and that's what I had asked earlier, that the actual format is not complete yet, and
So
I guess we're going to have to wait till the consultants are on board, and then we'll have to map it out at that point.
Okay. So is that the same? This is the comment you had made at the beginning of the meeting, but is that the same situation with how to take the public comment?
Yes.
Issue? So we'll do that.
I'll
Okay.
tie it all in.
I was just curious as to if there were any other action items or recommendations you'd be bringing to the full commission.
Yeah, there are actually two I want to present to the subcommittee, but to just end with a footnote on that as well, the meeting framework would have to be detailed out and fleshed out. Once we have the mapper online, and then the issues that Commissioner Baraba brought out, what do we do? Doing that framework, we need to consider what the commission in turn is going to be observing and making comments on. So I think we're going to have to pull all these elements together to establish what is a meeting framework. Does that make sense? So let me go then to items that I'd like for the subcommittee to make a motion of approval, or to make a recommendation for approval. To make a motion to approve a recommendation to the full commission on Friday, first of all, the March 31st conference in partnership with Common Cause.
Yeah, Redistricting California.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll put that on the floor first.
I'd like to move that the Technical Advisory Committee agree to participate with the event on March 31st with Redistricting California, and as many commissioners attend as possible.
We're in the outreach committee. Outreach, not technical.
Okay. Forgive me. Mr. Baraba,
Listen, we'll
don't
take a few
escalate.
things, but don't.
Please don't. Please strike that. It's late.
Too late.
Let me restate that quickly, that the Community Outreach Committee, Community Outreach Advisory Committee participate in the California Redistricting Convention conference, actually, to be held on March 31st at the DoubleTree Hotel at the San Francisco Airport. And as many commissioners as possible attend.
So that is a motion by Commissioner Parvenu. I need a second.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Raya. Any discussion? Okay. Yes, Rob.
I just do want to come back with a recommendation after I speak with Kirk regarding how many commissioners we can have in making presentations, and because right now we have Commissioner Anchetta in the morning, and then we would have maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So I don't know if it's necessary to have the full or as many commissioners there. That maybe I can work with the commissioners in.
I think the motion is as many commissioners as possible, right?
Right.
Janice,
Well, I'm not going to totally withdraw my second. Well, maybe I will. Yeah, we did talk. This is what happens when it gets to be 5 o'clock. We did talk earlier about not having a lot of people go to this one.
To this one.
Yeah, that it is pretty. I think it's been pretty well set up. So probably we should just, sort of approve that certain commissioners and let the communications director handle that. Would that be okay
That's
with you
fine.
to amend it?
Sure.
Poor Janice is saying, what?
is a friendly amendment to
Start over.
Let me withdraw the earlier motion and restate that more simplistically, that we attend, that the communications, the outreach committee recommends that the commission participate in the March 31st event in cooperation with Redistricting California, the event being the conference to be held on March 31st from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the DoubleTree Hotel at the San Francisco Airport.
I need a second.
Oh, second, sorry.
Okay. Further discussion.
A technicality, you said from 12 to 5. Is it from 9 to 5? Just because I heard Commissioner Anchetta will be there in the morning.
And that is separate from it's a private media briefing for ethnic media.
Oh, okay.
So it is 12 to 5.
Yes.
All day. Just the day. What's the
Okay. All right. Don't be so specific.
Yeah.
All right. Let me call for the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. All right. The second motion that I'd like for the subcommittee to consider is the schedule as presented by staff.
Well, I move that we adopt the meeting schedule, hearing schedule, and meeting schedule, and including the proposed release dates.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Giddy. I should back up and technically ask if there is anyone in the public that would like to speak. There's no one here. So let the record show there's no one in attendance. Dan, did you want to make a comment?
Only in that I presume that this motion encompasses the changes that you asked us to make. And the one change that I want to be clear on, so that we're certain, is that we would be, per Commissioner Yao's, I think, very good suggestion, that we would present our first report drafts with our second draft release maps, so that the public would have an opportunity to vet them. So we'll put that in, but I just want to make sure that that was your intention.
Yes.
Could you say that again?
That on the second draft release of the maps on July 1st, that we would release our first report drafts at that same time, so that the public would have 14 days to at least vet the report. And we're going to go back and redo the map, so the map will reflect your changes. I just wanted to make sure that that was what you wanted.
Okay, so the maker of the motion, is that okay with you? In a second?
Yes.
All right. Again, there's no one in attendance, so...
But we should remind our viewing audience that if they have comments, so we can hear them before the full commission votes on it.
Yes, I am going to do that.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. I'm sorry.
And the vote, the results of the vote here will be carried forth to the full commission on Friday, so we encourage the public, the viewing public, to please give us their response to this motion and our recommended schedule in the meantime between now and then. Okay? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up with a summary.
Commissioner Ontai, could I
Yes.
make one quick comment? I just wanted to say thank you to the Outreach Advisory Committee for getting something going that we could really work with, and a special thanks to staff, I think, for taking on this responsibility. I think CCP really started us off on a good note and got the ball rolling, but with some of the changes and our partnership, staff took this on, and I want to just commend them for doing an excellent job, and I think that's it gave the Outreach Committee something to work with, and I think this is really although daunting, it's exciting to see us be able to move forward, and I look forward to getting involved. So thank you to staff and to Outreach Committee for doing this.
And I completely concur with that. And I just want to say, Maika Inui Loa, it's very well done in Hawaiian. Okay. So we're going to have a summary by Commissioner Gavino.
Yeah, we started out by talking about the March 31st event, and of course, we just moved to encourage the commission to participate and also to identify some representatives, for that participation. So regarding the hearing schedule, which I also thought was involved a lot of work, and certainly staff is to be commended for the great schedule and trying to work all those moving parts, all of those elements, incorporating them the way that you did. I thought that was fantastic. So we moved to recommend that to the full commission. And also, I might add that we need to encourage their commitment to participate within that schedule, and by identifying their non-availability and ASAP. And then secondly, that staff needs some help with establishing some venues for those events, and we should do that very quickly as well, given that the information that I've received with meeting with editorial boards, is that they're ready to support the effort of outreach to the community, but they're looking for some definite dates and, of course, some definite locations so that they can provide that information out. We talked about the video, and so essentially doing a video, a short video, perhaps 5 minutes or so, working with Chapman College that would essentially be a promotional video messaging for the engagement with the public input meetings, and we'll be working with some storyboarding early next week, and they're planning on filming next Thursday, March the 24th. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And then we talked about the toolkit, and we presented, our staff presented this toolkit, which was, I thought, very well done, very comprehensive, with some comments by some commissioners related to perhaps making it a little bit more engaging. One suggestion was going with the existing pamphlets that have already been made available and partnering with them in terms of reproduction of those materials, and then also perhaps doing kind of like an engagement flyer that could be easily reproduced for handing out to the general community. As far as translations were concerned, doing it definitely in Spanish, and looking at the other 5 or 6 languages as recommended by the Secretary of State. So we talked about the report, and it seems that we need to provide not only a summary report, but an interim report describing the maps that we provide to the community as far as how we got to that, those maps. And then we talked about deeper outreach into the grassroots, mentioning by our staff that working with the New America organization, ethnic media organization, that they're ready and willing to help us. And then the last item that we talked about was a meeting framework, and which is one of our agenda items, and we will be fleshing that out once the consultant's on board.
Excellent job. My goodness, we did a lot. So, yes, Rob.
I was remiss earlier when I was talking about the Chapman Film Bowl to mention that it was Commissioner Ward who actually contacted the film school and did the meetings and negotiations, and have been working with them, and so I want to thank him.
Great, great. So nice to know. Any other comments from my fellow commissioners? If not, I want to conclude this subcommittee meeting and urge everyone to have a very, very green evening.